Hey guys, Metal Jesus here. Now I'm a big fan of the company Analogue because for a while now they've been releasing extremely high quality FPGA based retro clone systems with nearly 100% compatibility, zero lag, all with an elegant design. Their NES and Super NES clone systems are already well received, and their brand new Genesis FPGA based clone system is called the Mega Sg. And that one is highly anticipated as well. So in this video, we're going to review the system. I also have the controller here. We're going to compare it to an original Sega Genesis as well as the Retron 5, so you can decide which system is right for you. Let's take a look. All right, here is a closer look of the Analogue Mega Sg. And like I mentioned, this is meant to be a Sega Genesis / Mega Drive clone system, but it's different than a lot of the other ones that are already out there on the market that are kind of cheaper or maybe not as good, because this one is FPGA based, meaning it's not actually emulation. It's technically a digital recreation of the original hardware. Now, why would you want to do that, and what's the big deal about FPGA? Well, if you want to bring those classic Genesis games into the modern era with crystal clear 1080p output to your brand new HD television without introducing any latency, well again, FPGA is the way to go. And with this release, they're pairing it with the 8BitDo's high-quality M30 controller that transmits wirelessly, but that is optional because you can use original controllers if you wish. And you'll notice the size of this clone system is smaller than even the Model 2 Genesis. It's actually almost identical to the size of their Super Nintendo clone system they put out last year. These feel very sturdy, very high quality. Let's go ahead and walk around the unit. This is the front, and on the top there you have the power as well as the reset button. Then you have the two controller ports right there, and you also have a headphone jack. On the back of the machine, they keep it very simple. You have an HDMI out as well as a micro USB power input, and it does come with a power brick and cable in the box. On the left side of the unit is a SD slot where you can update the firmware, and then on the right side there is a port where you can plug it into a Sega CD, and I'm going to demonstrate that in a bit. But for now, let's go ahead and get it all plugged in, turned on, and let's check out the menu and the settings. Here at the main menu, you can run cartridges, which is pretty self-explanatory, but below that, check it out, it's Play Ultra Core. That is an unreleased Genesis game that is included on every one of these consoles. Now, I'm going to show that running in a bit. It's really cool. Below that, you have settings and then tools. Now let's go ahead and go into tools for a second. You'll notice that there are two options here. Cheat codes, which is very cool. And then you can also test your controller inputs if you're having problems or you want to check out, lag, things like that. Back under settings, let's go ahead and go into video. Here's where you can change resolutions. You can also adjust the screen size. You can mess around with different scalers, which is something I typically don't do, but some people might. You can also turn on a couple different scan lines if that's your thing, and I'll demonstrate that in a bit. And if you want to dig a bit deeper, there are advanced settings like the ability to adjust the specific colors. That's not something I really typically mess around with. Under audio, there's some useful options like the ability to change the headphone volume. You can also mess around with the stereo panning and a lot more. Now, if you go under System, this is where you can manually change the region of cartridges that you want to play. This is very handy if you're going to go out and buy import games. And this is really just the tip of the iceberg of what you can do and customize with this Mega Sg. I just want to kind of give you an idea here that if you like to tinker with your hardware and your software, you're going to love this thing because you can really mess around with it. But as you guys know, it's all about the games. So let's go ahead and check out some. I'm going to start off by putting a copy of Earthworm Jim into my Sega CDX, and then we're going to compare that to the same cartridge plugged into the Mega Sg. So here is Earthworm Jim plugged into my CDX, outputting via Composite. Now that is the simple yellow cable that a lot of people typically would use in North America to connect their Sega Genesis to their television. And as you can see, it's not very good when you upscale it to HD. It doesn't look great at all. And here is the same cartridge outputting via the Mega SG. And as you can see, it's night and day. The Mega SG just looks fantastic. The Mega SG is outputting at 1080p, and I think some of you are going, well, okay, that's all fine and good, but you know, Composite is really one of the worst types of connections that you can have for an older console like this. And I just happened to be testing a prototype of a new pound cable that taps into the RGB signal and then outputs via HDMI. Now this is not yet completely finished, but I do have permission to show you guys this. So let's check out an RGB signal and then compare it to the Mega SG. Here's my Sega Genesis Model 2, but instead of using Composite, which of course is crappy, it's actually using that upcoming pound cable, which taps into RGB. And as you can see, it's already noticeably much better. And then let's go ahead and go back and forth between that pound cable and also the Analogue Mega Sg. And as you can see, it's definitely closer in quality, although I still have to give it to the Mega Sg as just being that much sharper. Now let's go ahead and pop that same cartridge into the Hyperkin Retron 5. Now, as you guys know, the Retron 5 is a multi-purpose emulation system, so it supports the Genesis, the Super Nintendo, the Nintendo. It also has Game Boy Advance support and everything like that. So it does a little of everything. And let's take a look and see if we can see the difference. So here is Earthworm Jim running on the Retron 5, and the Retron 5 outputs to 720p, so it's not going to be as sharp. And as we switch over to the Analog, you do see that it sharpens up quite a bit. Also, the colors are just slightly more vivid. And we can go back and forth here, and you know, it's subtle, but you do notice it. And we can also go side by side as well. Another side effect of emulation, often, especially with the Genesis, is that the audio isn't great. Now, the Retron 5 is okay, but for right now, we're just focusing on the visuals. Now let's move on to Castlevania Bloodlines, and we're going to start with the lowest quality here. This is Composite on my CDX, and yeah, it looks absolutely terrible. You'd never want to play it this way. The next step up is probably my Genesis 2 with the pound cable. Again, that's tapping into the RGB signal. And then we have the same cartridge running on the Retron 5. Again, this is via emulation. And then here is Castlevania Bloodlines running on the Analogue Mega Sg. It looks beautiful. It looks stunning. And then here they are running side by side, and I've slowed the footage down slightly to hopefully help you see the differences. But again, keep in mind, it's the same cartridge just plugged into 4 different systems. And then let's check out Gargoyles. Again, here, I know it's not fair to show Composite, but it's just so shocking when you go back and forth between Composite and again, the Analogue Mega Sg. This is one of the most beautiful games, and I love this level here because all the rich reds. Again, you just don't get it when you play with Composite or a lower quality resolution, but when it's crisp like that, this game looks amazing. In the last couple years, homebrew games or brand new games made for old systems like Little Medusa here have really started to gain in popularity. And so let's check it out running on the Retron 5. Yeah, well, this is typically my experience running these type of cartridges on the Retron 5, which again is an emulation system. They just don't work. And I understand they don't really support them, but it is definitely a bummer. But the same cartridge plugged into the Mega Sg, which again is FPGA based, works perfectly. It looks beautiful. And this is exactly what I'm looking for, because that's what I love about this, is that it's not emulation, it's recreation of the hardware. So if you have a homebrew or a new game like this designed to run on the original hardware, well, it will typically run also on the Mega Sg. And that is really, really awesome. Now, I know some of you are big into scan lines. Me personally, I actually don't typically have them on, but I know some of you are very nostalgic for them. And of course, the Mega SG supports them. So let's go ahead and show what that looks like. Anytime you're in a game, you can press start and down on your controller to bring up the menu, and then you can go into video and also scan lines, and you can either turn them on or turn them off. And so this is what they look like when they're on. Let's check out another game called Blades of Vengeance. Now this is scan lines turned off, but we're gonna go into the menu here and then turn them on, and you can see what that looks like. Bad audio is definitely annoying, and it's a byproduct of some of these cheaper, lower-end emulation devices. So let's go ahead and see how the Mega SG does. We're gonna start with a Sega Genesis Model 2, and we'll compare it side by side. I think that demonstration for me just shows how crisp and full the Mega SG sounds compared to the original. Now the sound effects and the timbre and all that stuff sounds fairly similar to me compared to the original, but there's just an extra definition to it with the Mega SG. It sounds excellent. Now, just so you know, I'm using two different Elgato capture devices depending on what type of connection I have, but yeah, there's no comparison. I mean, the Mega SG just sounds fantastic. Now let's go ahead and check out the X-Men game, and we're gonna start with Composite. So this is my CDX with the original hardware. Here's a little bit of RoboCop versus Terminator. This game is so awesome, so bloody. Now let's go ahead and check out Sega CD support. So this is the Model 2 of the Sega CD here. I actually picked this up at a garage sale. I actually had no idea if it worked until I actually did this video, but it's designed to have the Model 2 Genesis plugged into the side here. Now what's really cool about it is that the Mega SG supports that as well. So you see this little pad right here, it comes with this pad. You put it down there, which raises it up just slightly, and then you pop open the side and you can slide your Mega SG right next to the Sega CD there, all snug and cozy. And then when you fire it up, you get the Sega CD menu here looking glorious in 1080p. All right, let's go ahead and check out Sonic CD. I have to be honest, the first time I ran this, I actually wasn't getting any CD audio, and actually I was beating my head against the wall. I couldn't figure it out, and thankfully Joe from GameSack figured it out. There's an option under the settings menu on the Mega SG to enable CD audio. So just be aware if they don't fix that in a firmware update that you need to go in there and actually set that setting to get CD audio on the Sega CD. Rise of the Dragon is a fun one to check out on the Sega CD because there are a ton of voiced characters in this game.
In 3 days, my destiny will be realized. Blade, where the hell were you last night? We did have a date, or did that happen to slip your mind?
Yeah, see, I'm kind of in trouble with my girlfriend for, missing a date, so...
I see. I thought I detected anxiety in your aura. Hi, Blade. Wanna play house?
Another thing that's really nice about a system that is using FPGA and recreating the hardware is that things like EverDrives tend to work. But you're probably wondering, does 32X work? And the answer is no. It'd be really cool if it did, but it's not a deal breaker because it doesn't. I actually tried it also on the EverDrive, and even the ROMs don't work. And they acknowledge that on their site. It'd be cool if they could add it in the future, but again, I don't think it's a deal breaker. But they do have support for the Sega Master System. That's the console that came out before the Genesis, and they have an adapter included in the box. So let's go ahead and check out Batman Returns running on the Sega Master System through the adapter into the Mega SG. And as you can see, the games look great. So this is really cool. I mean, basically you have all the Sega Genesis games, and you have 341 potential Sega Master System games that you can also play on the same system. That is pretty awesome. I was curious, since I have a Sega Master System game that's on the card format, if the Hyperkin 3-in-1 adapter would work. So I popped in Spy vs. Spy, and sure enough, actually it does work, which was a bit of a surprise. Maybe not. I'm not really sure how that adapter works, but yeah, it actually works and plays just fine. Now that adapter also supports the Game Gear. I did plug in a game to see if that would work. I was crossing my fingers, but it doesn't. That's okay, because they've announced that they are going to support that in the future with their own adapter. And then remember how I said that there's a built-in game in the Mega SG called Ultra Core. So this is a 2D side-scrolling shooter that's similar to the Turrican series that was in development back in the 1990s, but it was canceled back then. And then it was almost lost forever when I guess a hard drive crashed, but they were able to recover it. What's cool is this game was originally developed by Digital Illusions. Now they may sound familiar because they ultimately turned into DICE, the developer that became worldwide famous for the Battlefield series. But once it was recovered, it was licensed to Analogue to be included here. And as you can see by this footage, it is awesome. This is a really fun game to play. Very hard, but very satisfying. The Analogue Mega Sg sells for $190, and if you want the optional wireless controller, that's going to be another $25. Not cheap, but as you can see from this video, it's pretty great. Now, they also mentioned that they're going to be releasing adapters for the Game Gear, Master System cards, as well as the SG-1000 and the SG-3000 later this year. Now, if you want to find out more information, I'll put a link down in the video description below. Love to know what you guys think about the system, and also what other systems you would like Analogue to tackle next. There are so many to choose from. It'd be killer. All right, guys, thank you very much for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Take care. As you can see, I had a lot of fun with the Mega SG. I mean, this is the type of clone system that I want. I don't want these $40, $50, $60 emulation, plastic, crappy systems that barely work, or they don't work that well, or whatever. I want these quality systems that actually do it justice. And I'm very happy to see that Analogue exists and continues to make awesome systems like this. All right, guys, have a great day.